Hello, my name is Jonathan Forster, and welcome to the Multi-Story Thinking podcast on interior design. I'm an interior designer and educator. My job is to improve quality of life and productivity by helping people to create beautiful and practical spaces to live and work in. The Multi-Story Thinking podcast takes an educational slant to the interior design world. If, like me, you are curious about how things are done within the industry, want to know how people got their breaks and how they've developed their careers, and get some top tips and advice, then this is the podcast for you. So sit back, relax, as we help unravel the mysteries of interior design. Kellyanne Watson is the Managing Director of the Class Foundation, partner-based non-profit organisation with a simple goal to further the professionalism and knowledge of student housing in Europe and beyond. Established in 2011, the foundation is now the largest European student housing platform open to anyone and everyone. Kellyanne cut her teeth as Students' Union President of Welfare and Community and as Delivery and Development Officer for Unipol Student Homes. She's worked alongside councils and accommodation providers to raise standards of housing and opened up access and opportunities for all students. Originally from the north of England, she now lives in Amsterdam. Spoke to Kellyanne via Zoom in April 2023. In this episode, we discover the evolution of the Class Foundation and how it has sought to educate, inform and raise awareness within the student accommodation sector, why housing strategies should be at the forefront before you try to attract and retain talent, how a collaborative approach can deliver strategies for future development and the importance of collecting student data, and why it is important to have no fear and to dare people to be better. Great to see you, by the way, and it's
Thank
been,
you.
Obviously
It's been
not,
too long.
I know, I don't know where the time goes, although the last 8 months I've been renovating a property, so I've been
Oh,
like in
lovely.
a little bubble. Yeah, we've just moved into a 500-year-old farmhouse,
Wow.
and I've been decorating it ever since, I think it feels like, but
Forever. Funny,
yeah,
actually, we're obviously we've not bought anything, but we're looking at the moment just because the housing market's such a mess in the Netherlands.
yes,
It's much better to buy than it is to rent at this moment in time.
really,
Something daft like 48% of the private rented sector have come offline in the Netherlands at the moment, just because licensing and policy is so restrictive that landlords don't want to rent anymore with all the rent caps and the
right, I see, yeah.
hoops that you've got to jump through. So they've just withdrawn them from the market. So there's this giant limbo stage where, if you're renting, you're in a bit of a pickle, really.
Yeah, there's still. Well, is it difficult to find places to live then, or
Yeah, so not only is there not enough houses, there's also less houses on the market,
yeah,
rented houses on the market in general. They're not building the new builds fast enough.
yeah,
Yeah, and they've got this. Yeah, they're trying to get more people under 35 to buy at the moment. So they've given a load of incentives, tax cuts, etc. So yeah, even though I don't particularly want to buy here at the moment, I think it's the only choice I've got.
makes
So.
more sense. Yeah,
Mhm.
so that's interesting because I think that must have an impact on the context of student accommodation.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons why the international students have been asked not to come this year.
Really?
Yeah, because there's just genuinely no houses, and obviously nobody wants to stop international students coming. But at the same time, I think in terms of a quick win, I do kind of understand why they've had to, you know, unfortunately discriminate against one type of
Yes.
cohort
Yeah.
because there just physically isn't enough houses, and the government isn't, they've not said long term that they want to stop international students, but they need 60,000 student beds to be built across the
Right.
Netherlands. That's
Yeah.
the shortfall, and they
That's
are
quite a
looking
lot
at
of
doing
properties,
that.
isn't it?
That
That.
is a lot of properties.
Yeah.
There's not that much space really in the Netherlands, so they're
No.
going to have to get smart really with the types of building. But yeah, it's an utter mess. This is a great example of how housing strategies should be at the forefront before you attract and retain talent, because they've
Yes.
done it the wrong way round. So
Is that's we've sort of segued into this. That's sort of is that part of the approach of the Class Foundation? Which, if you could explain a little bit about what the Class Foundation is for our listeners. But in terms of on your website, building the future, it's like strategy and government influence must be really important to get those two things aligned.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think they go hand in hand with each other. And I think it's interesting because the Netherlands was always great at attracting and retaining talent. That was something that they should be really proud of what they were able to achieve. But you've got the likes of Portugal now that have like a zero tax benefits for digital nomads going over, but then again don't have the correct housing needs in place to be able to cater sufficiently for all of those people coming in. So actually, the Netherlands now is being used as a case study of really not what to do, and to try and change the thought process of how to approach these types of strategies. And I think cities, the private sector, the public sector, but then also businesses and universities as well, are actually seeing the importance of having and playing a part in housing strategies, because you can't have all of these people come over without having the adequate housing available. So what we're seeing, yeah, as a not-for-profit that is an ecosystem and membership base, that we're seeing not only the real estate sector, which predominantly we've had investors, developers, and operators involved in our community. We're actually seeing higher education playing a more important role in the housing strategy at a city level. City leaders, really being at the forefront of driving these initiatives forwards, because they can see actually how much chaos this can cause by not being there at the forefront and helping these strategies move forward. But then also the other organizations that will help us actually solve some of these problems. So your urban planners, your designers, your architects, the technology providers as well, because a lot of them come forward with the solutions that we need to be able to deliver these type of assets. So really what we're doing is we're bringing together this amazing ecosystem of all stakeholders that have a part to play in creating homes for people and helping professionalize the living sector. But we focus purely on student and young professionals, but there's still a large cohort that need housing. So
Yes. Yeah.
yeah.
So I think we'll come back to that point about that kind of ecosystem and that holistic approach. But just to fill in about the Class Foundation, your role there, essentially managing director. What does that entail? And also, could you just give us a back, on the back of a envelope sort of summary of the Class Foundation, which has been going for quite some time in a different name, guys, before it shifted to the Class Foundation title. What were their original aims? What's their trajectory? And then a little bit about what you're doing there, because you came into this a couple of years ago when I was working with the team and joined that online course thing we were doing, which was all a bit weird. It was all via Zoom, and we'd never met and normally these things go on in real life, but you came into that and your role has changed quite rapidly over the last couple of years, so it just gives a bit of background on that.
Yeah,
Great.
of course. So I'll start off with the Class Foundation and I guess our journey and our history. So the Class Foundation was originally called the Class of 2020, and it was set up as a not-for-profit of some operators and investors that were quite new to the sector. So the sector in Europe is probably only around 10 years old in some of the kind of the more mature markets, such as the Netherlands. And some operators and developers that were really wanting to build some PBSA, but didn't really have the recognition or maybe the planning and the city leadership didn't really understand what type of assets and what the benefits were for building student accommodation. So what they did was they created a charity that really was about educating and professionalizing PBSA. across the board and working with the key stakeholders. So that was 11 years ago, and the main mission was to help solve the housing crisis. And they were extremely ambitious, and they wanted to do that by 2020. And actually, as most people know, that in this sector, housing provision has tightened. The need for more student housing and other types of housing has obviously only become more increasingly needed. And also as well, the types of issues have changed as well. So we built more housing, but then also the ESG agenda, building buildings that had social value, integration, community well-being at the heart of it became more and more important, as well as offering different types of housing, different types of rooms as well, And I think that's really important for us to understand the evolution of student accommodation, and particularly in the Netherlands and in Europe. It is very, very different to the UK, which is where my background first started in PBSA, which was originally a lot of the housing provision was owned by the institutions and was actually at the forefront of creating affordable housing for students that wanted to move away in their first year and experience and be on campus and experience that. As that never really took off in the Netherlands and in Europe. It was actually seen as a fully immersive experience where bars, restaurants, gyms were included. It was a space for international students to connect with each other. And because of that, actually, innovation within this area has developed a lot more quickly than it has done in the UK. But we can go into the kind of the policy and everything that's behind the planning and actually how different the assets are a little bit later on. But really, that's what the Class Foundation started as. It was really there to educate, inform, and raise awareness of the type of asset with the main stakeholders, that everybody paid a little bit into a pot. And what we were able to do is achieve events, research, and advice at a leadership level. So the majority of the people involved in our community are C-suites, so that we can really influence leadership and create, I guess, the thought leadership for the sector going forward.
Yeah, so I've seen that in action, because I led one of those workshop sessions, and we had some interviews and podcasts and live events over Zoom, where you're really discussing the issues of the day. And that's really quite fascinating to get the mix of people in the same space discussing what their challenges are, and then brainstorming the solutions, which is such an enlightened approach, to the more competitive nature of business, so that sort of aspiration has been fueling the kind of thought process for people across the whole industry. What I really find interesting is that, that how advanced it is in Europe compared to the UK. Now, we look at UK student accommodation, and if you of a certain age, you'll remember what it used to be like, back in the 80s and stuff, and now it has changed radically for the better, but it still seems to be a million miles behind what's going on in the Netherlands and across Europe and other areas. So where does that come from? Where's that difference in time in the approach? You talk about the more mixed, multi-generational, multi-use spaces. How did that evolve in Europe and the Netherlands, for example?
So I think in the UK, it also does have a lot of positives. The sector was able to build a lot of student accommodation in a short space of time, or shortish space of time. They did focus on the community element. They had great partnerships with the universities. They was able to counteract some of the risks with underwrite agreements. Also location, some of the opportunities in terms of location, being either right smack bang in the city centre or being right pretty much on campus was I think a really amazing opportunity for the sector in the UK. But you're right, that a lot of the issues around licensing, planning and policy, particularly being outdated, and also putting the asset itself in a box a lot of the time, has created and stifled innovation in my eyes within the UK. So an example of that is if you build a PBSA building. Because students are exempt from council tax, it means that you cannot use this building if, say, one of the floors are completely empty for young professionals, because they are not classed as students. So then that cannot be used in the same way. Also, as well, if you had maybe some rental units downstairs that maybe could be used for hospitality purposes, or for retail, for example, or you want to make it into a local restaurant or cafe, actually you need a certain type of license to be to actually use it for those types of purposes, which then basically means that your building is a lot less flexible in terms of its actual usage. And I think that actually does stifle the innovation, as I mentioned, but it has also as well created a lot more risk for investors. And sometimes that can make the asset potentially less appealing to those types of investors. So yeah, unfortunately, there is a long way to go. I personally think that there needs to be a little bit of a movement from the sector in terms of us proactively looking at policy and how do we unbox some of those issues that we're and challenges that we're facing as a sector, and collectively come together to create an agenda that is beneficial. And that could also be looking at, you know, the affordability crisis that's happening. How do we create more affordable options, whilst also being able to integrate those into these kind of more high quality, service driven assets? And I think that's one of the things that's holding us back as a sector, and something that I really, really want to make sure that the Class Foundation is at the forefront of leading that voice and that movement.
So there's some political kind of influence that you need to draw on, really, there to get policy shifts. How difficult is that? And particularly when you're dealing with, you know, Europe, not just one single country, never mind the idea of Brexit. You know, it's like, you know, getting that galvanized across different countries must be quite of a challenge.
It is indeed, yes, because also student accommodation is approached, education is approached, students are approached differently in each country. So that makes it extremely difficult. We've got some, the Netherlands is a great example. They're currently running a national action plan, which is where all municipalities, or councils as they're called in the UK, get together around a table. They talk about their housing shortages, their issues they're facing, all of the higher education, and then the real estate sector or the housing sector. So from both sides, the social and the private, all sit around a table together. They identify the gaps. They talk about who can actually solve some of those challenges. So who can build in those markets, what types of assets are needed, you know, which ones are affordable, which ones could be more community focused, which ones might be more environmentally focused. And actually they sit down together, they create a collective agenda and an initiative. And what they've decided is 60,000 beds need to be built by 2027. And they all signed a piece of paper which holds each of them accountable. So that's a really inclusive and positive way to approach these types of issues, and something I would like to see in other countries and cities, because it can be at a national level, but it also could be a localized level. You've got Manchester City Council that are driving forward a student living strategy. And that includes, again, all of the stakeholders, the universities involved with driving forward to make sure that that is successful. And we're seeing that in the likes of Barcelona and Madrid as well, where student numbers are rising. They are seeing a plateaued effect in terms of student housing. That's causing issues in the city, putting stress and pressure on the housing market, driving up prices, driving down quality. So the government has been at the forefront of basically leading that. And sometimes the governments don't actually have to execute that strategy, but I think it's really important that they put in the guidance and set the vision so that everybody can play a part and work towards something. And I think that's something we should see across other countries, but particularly in other cities, especially the likes of Paris, London, which are really, really struggling at the moment in terms of affordability, accessibility, but also just supply in general.
I think that holistic approach has got to be something. I mean, from a university perspective, it's an important thing to embrace. Because a lot of the time, I think universities are guilty of just being what they are and not thinking they need to interact too much. They get students applying, they come, they're here for 3 years or so, then they leave. And to think that that's the only role that you've got is
Yeah.
missing a kind of bigger picture, because what you want to do is build, like you say, a reason for people to stay on in a city. You've invested 3 years of your life, why not stay a bit longer? But you need to have the jobs, you need to have the housing, you need to have the amenities, and often that's not there in a cohesive place, is it?
No, absolutely. I think universities are starting to see actually the relationship between the living and the academic experience now,
Mm.
though. And what they're seeing is students that have that support security within the housing are actually a lot more successful and happier whilst at university. But what is worrying for me is EIAE, the European Admissions Office, actually reported that somewhat, don't fully quote me on it, but it was around 50% of universities that had an enrolment and admissions strategy did not consider housing when they were doing that. That's really worrying that, we're not talking about the growth in these university cities in terms of student numbers. Universities are inviting students to the city to study with them, but are not considering where they're going to live. And I think that's something that universities unfortunately need to take accountability for, but work alongside the cities and the housing providers. We're all working towards the same goal and objective, which is to create more housing for students.
Mm.
So if that's going to be beneficial, the university experience, then I wouldn't know why they would shut the door and not work alongside us.
Yeah, yeah. I think that thing about combined approach, so sure, we need more housing for the students, but we need more housing for young professionals. We need more housing for families. We need more for everybody, don't we? And if that's part of a package that can be delivered, and I think
Yeah.
what we're looking at from a design point of view, because we've been working on a number of design projects for student accommodation and student spaces. It's that integration of activities that is really starting to be seen as an important element of trying to create facilities that other people can use, interactions. So communal spaces that students can use, but the members of the public can come into. And just having that wider approach, that it's not just a student space, it's not just a bedroom, and you're talking about buildings and housing supporting the academic experience. I mean, that's ultimately what we're there for, is to enable students to learn. And how important is the space they're living in to do that? It's crucial, isn't it, to have the space, the flexibility, the mix of spaces. And that's what gets us designers excited, is when we can start to build those spaces together to facilitate all these great opportunities for learning and building communities and creating friendships for life. It's all about the space to facilitate that.
Of course, yeah. And you know what I find absolutely bizarre? You know, a lot of the world see students as this kind of alien life form that goes to university, lives for 3 years, in a bubble, which a lot of them do, but they are not seen as residents of the community. They're not seen as, somebody that, these young people that are going to, play a massive part in being the next generation of leaders, of nurses, as bus drivers, and everything else. We don't open arms. We completely silo this type of cohort, and I think it's really important that when we're designing our buildings, that we design them with the community at the forefront of what we're doing. Green spaces should be used by everybody in the community. The universities in general are normally the heart and life of a city, and are actually, if you look at the success stories in terms of universities, the most successful cities in the world have major universities in them. Think about how we integrate design into our communities and cities in general. I think we do that by starting with young people.
Well, you've got this resource, haven't you? And also, a group of consumers which need housing, but also need the services. And I think, to think of them as a sort of transitory, here today, gone tomorrow sort of occurrence is a bit short-sighted. And to just leave it to the university to sort out as well. It's like there's no sort of bigger picture emerging there as of how you could create these spaces. Going back to the lecture series we did a couple of years ago, we were talking with different providers, and some of the case studies were really interesting in terms of what was going into the developments. To what extent has that been something that's evolved naturally, or has that been promoted by the class of 2020 and the Class Foundation over time? Have you picked up on the trends, or have you helped sort of generate them?
Well, it's a mixture of both, really. What we're actually finding in terms of design and what the types of offerings we have within these types of assets. You have some trailblazers, people that are really putting kind of the health, well-being community in the heart of the designs that they're doing. You've got a lot of organizations that are taking insight and from maybe more of a hospitality background or hotel industry of what has and hasn't worked as well. So it seems to be that there's also a lot of influence from external industries as well, which is, very, very interesting. But actually what we're finding now is using the students to help shape what student housing looks like in the future is definitely something that we're seeing as a trend. But then also as well, using different types of research. So the Class Foundation is actually running a piece of research called the SLM, so the Student Living Monitor. And it's the first data set of its type, and it's also going to be one of the largest data sets of its type as well. It's backed and endorsed by the European Union. Every major operator will be taking part in it. And also we're endorsed by ESM, which is a European student network as well. So we've got quite a large reach. And what we're doing is we're measuring the services, amenities, and support that students have directly on offer. So we'll ask them, do they have access to counselling service? Do they have access to a cafe? Do they have access to a gym? What type of Wi-Fi packages? Are they all inclusive? Like everything basically that's included in their living experience. And we're going to measure that directly against the MHI5. So the MHI5 is a metric system that is used across Europe. It's a very well-known methodology where actually rates the residents' happiness levels within their cities. So how they say, Sweden is #1 in the world for happiness levels, for example, and then it's Prague, then it's Amsterdam, or and so on and so on. So the only cohort in the whole of the world that is not actually surveyed in this MHI5 is students. So we thought, why not? Let's take this approach and we'll apply it and we'll measure it directly against their living experience. That's really exciting. The other really exciting thing is we're not just going to measure students living in PBSA. We're going to measure students that are living in all types of housing. So are they living in university halls? Are they living at home with parents? Are they living in the PRS sector, so off-street properties within city centres? Are they living in PBSA? Are they an international student? Are they a domestic student? Etc., etc. What year of study are they in? Everything. And then what we can do is create some positive or negative correlations against the living experience and the happiness and well-being level of that student. So we're going to have 3 different types of reports, one at a European level, one at a national and local level, and then also at an individual level, so the type of asset itself. So I think this is really interesting because this is going to be a matrix system that basically measures social value, which is so difficult to measure in itself. Yeah. So how do those living experiences directly impact that? And where are the correlations? And what we can do then is influence future investment, services, and support and actually have that as some amazing recommendations at all of those three levels, at a European, at a local, and at an asset level.
So you've
So I
got
think
the
that's also
data.
really exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, that does sound good. You've got the data to back it up. I'm pleased to say that Plymouth, University of Plymouth, they say that people in Plymouth are the happiest in the UK. There was a recent report.
Wonderful.
That's 2018. Maybe they're not so happy now. I don't know, but I think the importance of statistics. I mean, you can do what you want with statistics, but it sounds like if you're doing a rigorous research process, you've got some really strong sort of metrics there to demonstrate the benefits and also identify these types of initiatives that are going to make a difference.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's what way better to evolve a sector by asking the people living in those
Yeah, I
buildings.
think
So
that's crucial, isn't it, to get some engagement with the user groups. I think that's the thing. I mean, that's with most things, isn't it? It's like, speak to the people that are living the experience, because they'll be right at the front end of that, won't they? They'll know what the issues are. We run quite a few projects with our students on student accommodation in Plymouth, and the insights you get are just, they're often not even sort of radically different things, but it's just the detail. It's like, I want to plug next to my mirror so I can dry my hair.
yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
it's things like that, small scale, but then larger scale things about the focus on, places to study, places to meet, places to feel comfortable and relaxed in, the
mm,
emergence of well-being as being a really important factor. So we have student designs where they're really focusing on that, and you get a real sense of what are the main issues, not what we think the issues are, but what they actually are experiencing. So I think that really makes a difference.
oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Just going back to your time before you came to the Class Foundation, what sort of got you into student accommodation, and why are you so passionate about it?
For me personally, it was a personal experience. I went to Leeds University, and I was the first generation from my family to attend university. Um, we come from a very modest background. My family live in Preston. I've my parents don't own their own house. I'm brought up in standard council estates, accommodation. So I'm actually from an area that was very community focused as well, but maybe didn't feel like they were represented in terms of being able to go to university. So I worked really hard to go. I'm dyslexic, I've got ADHD. So not only having learning difficulties, I didn't necessarily have the support financially or understanding what it meant to go to university. So I decided to go anyway, even against all of my hardship. And I found that I was already at a massive disadvantage when I first arrived in Leeds. Not only being away from my family, but not being able to afford even the basic accommodation that my university offered. It was extremely difficult for me to be able to afford that. And as I kind of went through university and picked up several jobs to be able to afford to stay there, then also put a lot of pressure in terms of my academic experience as well. I kind of realized that it felt unfair. Somebody that really wanted to work hard and experience this, I felt that everything within my way was just a barrier, really. I really wanted to tackle some of the housing and community issues that students that maybe had come from, been first generation, or had maybe had financial struggles, or maybe had learning difficulties in general. And I really wanted to represent education that was accessible for all people. So when I decided to stand for election for the president of the university, which I run twice consecutively, and that really, I guess was the start of fueling my passion for creating a fairer access to education, but also living with helping raise the standards of student living. And I really focused on not only access to education, but access to living as well. I had a really great experience of working with Leeds City Council, who were extremely, kind of pro-student, rising the standards within student accommodation, but also looking at the transparency and fairness from landlords as well. I then went and worked for an organisation called Unipol, where I sat on their board of directors, was quite actively involved in challenging the private sector in creating spaces for people that had similar experiences to me, but also people who had different experiences as well. So I realized that students who had come, particularly to come and do a postgraduate talk course, who had come with dependents, actually really struggled getting housing, student housing, again, from a quality standard, but also a cost standard. And basically this just drived and fueled a passion to create access to education for all people if they would like it, and good quality housing whilst they were at university. And that really was at the forefront of me wanting to create better health and well-being clauses within the national code, increase student experience strategies, how that integrated better community sense of belonging, but then also raising the quality and the standard and design of the type of assets that we were offering. So I ended up doing that across the whole of the UK for 400,000 plus student beds that were within the national code, and then working with a multitude of universities and private providers to actually really be the movers and shakers of the sector in terms of what we were offering, and changing the sector into more of a service driven and away from this kind of real estate, real estate housing management service, into more of a service that was inclusive and proactive, and really was student focused, human centric. And I think that was one of the biggest movements that happened over the last 10 years of me working within the sector. And that was one of the reasons why I was really excited to move over to Europe, because it was fresh, it was new, and it was something that if we were able to tackle some of the challenges that we were facing maybe 20, 25 years into a more of a mature market in the UK, and being able to solve those issues at an earlier stage, that maybe we wouldn't repeat the same issues that we're facing.
Yes. That's amazing sort of experience, and it must have been really tough, but that's obviously given you a lot of resilience and drive to make a difference. Which is great.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it also has really given me no fear into daring the community to be better, because at the end of the day, without further education and lifelong learning and opportunities for young people, such as what the university can provide, then we will not have the amazing, flourishing, exciting opportunities that the future will hold. And I think it's really important that we understand that it's our obligation as a housing sector and universities as an educational sector to be able to provide those types of opportunities for those young people. And I think that's a really exciting space, and I'm really proud of what we do every single day. Not only as a young female leader in a predominantly male industry such as real estate, that's one element of it, but actually also being somebody that faced many challenges coming through university and actually wouldn't be here, passionate, excited, loving the job that I do, working in a community that inspires me every single day, without those opportunities. So I hope that we can continue to create those spaces for young people.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting you mentioned about the shift in how the industry has been going from, I guess, essentially managing assets to, if I'm right in thinking, managing people, the users. And that sort of more user-centric approach, I think, is key to all aspects of design. Never mind just student accommodation, but in that sector, what are you doing is you're supporting the students more, aren't you? And I think I've been aware of that as I've been teaching over the years, that the issues around diversity, neurodiversity, disabilities, and mental health have come much more to the surface as people have felt more confident to talk about it, and there's more resources, and I think managing the mental health of students is probably the hardest thing to do. Never mind teaching them. If we could just manage their mental health successfully, then the teaching wouldn't be half the struggle for lots of our students. But it is that, I think that's what's coming through, and it's maybe across lots of different sectors as well, is that we're recognizing the value of the people within the system, and that they need to be looked after. And I think student accommodation and student spaces are starting to get to grips with that. There's lots of services within the university to support students, but the spaces aren't doing that as effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just pre-COVID, I think there was a shift in landlords' approach to managing their assets and dealing with their tenants. And I think the reason for that is, just to put it into perspective, the highest risk in a student accommodation block used to be fire. And in 2019, it was reported the highest risk was suicide, not fire, in terms of health and safety. So a shift needed to happen.
Yeah.
And I think there isn't many housing providers in any type of cohort, probably except for the elderly, in retirement homes, that actually really are at the forefront of caring about mental health and well-being. There was a shift when the National Code decided to add a health and well-being clause into their regulation, into their accreditation scheme, which basically stated that landlords should take ownership of a tenant that is having openly mental health crisis, and should signpost and support efficiently. And to actually put that ownership on the landlord, and then for the landlord to go, okay, I agree, that's what we should be doing, is a great movement. And that makes me really proud to be in this sector. And I think the universities understand that that's also a really helpful shift, because the university can't be in all places at all times. So I think, again, building those relationships and partnerships between the housing and the universities is crucial to be able to increase mental health and happiness levels amongst students.
I think that's really important. I think that if you set it, it's almost like setting a brief, isn't it? Where if you put something in that's important and has to be delivered, then people will start working towards that. Whether that's legislative or guidance. If it's in the policy, it's in the strategy, people understand it, they can focus on it, and that's where you get the changes, don't you? Where the creativity is focused on the challenge. I think it's got to be ingrained in the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
We talked a lot about well-being. I know that there's a focus also on things like technology and sustainability that the Class Foundation are interested in. You've got a number of different sort of strands, haven't you, of research and debate, I guess. How do you manage that? What's driving the agenda of what you're interested in as an organization?
It's the community, really. We speak predominantly with investors, developers and operators, and ask about what their challenges are and what they think's important, because then that helps shape the conversations that we're having. We also speak a lot at city leadership level, and then also with higher education as well. So we basically are the middleman, because a lot of the time all of those different stakeholders speak different languages. So what we do is we're a listening ear. We absorb all of the information, and then we're able to kind of translate that into our events, research and advisory across the board. I guess the main key areas that we do focus on is housing supply and demand, because that is a major issue that's happening across the board. Transparency with enrollment numbers and aligning those strategies, housing strategies and educational strategies, between the key stakeholders is very, very important. As I mentioned before, policy and planning implications. How do we influence change there? And how do we drive increased policy that is advantageous to the student and also to the delivery of the assets as well? Obviously, student health and well-being, barriers to education, the cost of living, then also sustainability and technology, so the advances as well, which is basically going to help us become future-proof and create longevity in our sector, which is really important.
I'm just thinking about how you feel about, leadership, and, do you have a team to lead, or, are you thinking of leading an industry through your role?
Yeah, that's
Or
a
do
big
you see it
question.
as do you see it as leadership?
Yeah, I would say I do see my role as not only leadership within my absolute mighty and amazing team itself, but also a leader within our community as well. I don't think I have all the answers, but I think within our community we do. Which is why I think it's important that there's somebody or an organization that's in the middle, that's, I guess, tying all of those dots together and being able to positively come up with solutions and strategies that can help the sector to continue to thrive and grow. And I personally see myself as one of those cogs within the machine. There's also other amazing leaders within our community, but there is a shift happening. The people that were the grandfathers and grandmothers of our organization, of our sector, sorry, are starting to retire, but also as well, there's a shift and a change in what the assets need to be. And maybe they've been able to get us to a certain point, but now I think that there is a new generation of ideas and passion that need to take over. And that might come from, a policy point of view. It might come from a technology point of view. It might come from maybe more of a hospitality, a service background. And that's where I'm seeing the shift change. But what I think's most important as a leader is that we give everybody a voice and everybody the chance to take ownership and accountability to work towards the end goal, which is to create more affordable, higher quality accommodation that is human-centric for the next generation of students and leaders. I think that's, again, a really exciting space to be, and I'm really excited about helping elevate it and take it there, I guess, as we continue as a sector.
Nice. Yeah. So what's coming up next for the Class Foundation or yourself in the next few months?
We're going straight into our busy period now. We have our first in-person event on the 20th of April in London, talking about the state of student living within the UK, which is very, very exciting, at Osborne Clark in London city centre. So you can go onto our website, theclassfoundation.com, to get tickets or find out more. We also have our first value innovation workshop called Smart Student Living on the 1st of June. It's a brand new type of event to us. We're inviting tech and innovation teams from operators, and we're inviting the technology providers, the products teams, and the actual people that are the developers of the products itself, to come together and talk about automation, integration of all of the services, how we actually elevate data and use data to impact student experience, sustainability and ROI initiatives, and how do we actually create an ecosystem between that type of cohort to create the future of tech within real estate. So that's really exciting. They're kind of more value-based workshops. So if you're interested in that, then also check it out on our website. We have 2 more student living regionals, one in Lisbon in July and one in Milan in September. So if you're also interested in the Italian and the Iberian market, you can come along to those. And then, of course, our annual conference, which is November 8th and 9th in Barcelona. We're being endorsed by Catalonia and Barcelona, the city itself. Our theme is home by choice. And actually, how do we create urban utopias for the next generation of students? So really exciting.
Yeah, that sounds brilliant. And just in terms of how potential partners or professionals would get engaged with you in some way, what are the ways of being part of the story, if you like?
So it's in twofold. So if you're an organization that is particularly interested in helping advance and professionalize the sector, you can come and join us as members. That includes being part of our board, being part of shaping what we talk about and how we approach certain things, but then also a lot of our closed door events as well, so at a leadership level in terms of at cities, or focusing on certain topics such as investment, for example. So you can be part of those conversations as an organization if that's something that you're interested in. But then on the other side is also individuals. So these are, maybe the movers, the shakers, the thought leaders, the experts. You can reach out to any of my team, including myself, via email, via LinkedIn. All of our information is on our website. Or you can, I'm sure if I drop my email with you, Jonathan, people can also contact as well. But, if you're particularly interested in driving forward change within ESG, well-being, investment, mobility, internationalization, or helping solve the housing crisis in terms of student accommodation, then you can get involved with any of us. We have lots of opportunities from a research level to speaking on stage at our events, or helping us come up with a strategy and a plan, which then we can work collectively together on.
Okay, well, I'll put your details in the show notes so that
Great, thank you.
But it sounds like a great opportunity to take a collaborative approach to solving if we could solve it, that would be amazing. But improving the state of the housing market for the student accommodation market in particular.
Yeah, well, where there's a will, there's a way.
Definitely. I mean, that's great. I love the energy you've got for this. And I think when I first met you virtually, well, I've never met you in real life, actually. So
have you not? Oh, that just blew my mind.
That's like when I met you on Zoom, and here we still are. So I'm gonna have to come to an event and
please do
get some face-to-face action. Yeah,
please do. Well, we've got one next week if you're free. Yeah.
Well, I've looked at that, but I think I'm busy. But I'll have to just have a look at the diary and stuff. And Barcelona does sound good, actually. So it's
always.
Do you by any chance like traveling?
Yeah, I love to travel. I didn't really get to experience it as a younger adult and a young child. So I really just traveling and culture and being in different places and the food and meeting the different types of people, it's just an absolute experience. It makes me laugh because I still get on a plane and I'm like, can't believe I'm on a plane. I can't believe I'm going to be going to a new country. I am super grateful for all of the opportunities.
Traveling on planes.
But
I think going to other cultures, is like, it just opens your eyes to different ways of doing things. And, one could be very blinkered in life without that kind of experience. So I think the sort of the reach that the Class Foundation has is critical in terms of just drawing in as much thought, and creativity and ideas to the process, which has got to help, so keep it up.
I think not only about the ideas, which I think, really creating these bold ideas and brave ideas as well. It's also about learning from each other. So like learning what does work and what doesn't work. And like I said, not repeating the wheel all the time. I think that's really important that we continue to learn from each other and share with each other, because otherwise we're working backwards, we're working against each other. And I don't think that makes any sense at all. So
that's good, sensible northern approach.
I love that. I know it's probably a very northern approach,
No nonsense.
No nonsense at all.
like to thank Kellyanne for taking the time to talk to me. The Class Foundation has been making huge inroads into the development of different approaches and the discussion and research around different issues across Europe, and it's really interesting to get stuck into some of their details. Have a look on their website. They've got so much content, research documents, white papers, reviews of existing student accommodation, and it's really interesting to dig deep into that and see what the trends are and also the differences across continents. So it's having influence across the whole of Europe and beyond. There's a number of events coming up. Follow the links from the show notes and you'll get through to that. Very worthwhile attending if you can. And if you want to make contact with Kellyanne, her contact details through LinkedIn are also on the notes. I found it really fascinating to hear about Kellyanne's early experience of being a student, how that's informed her approach to making a difference within the industry, giving her a lot of resilience and passion to make changes. And that user-centric approach, drawing on her own experience, which really understands with empathy the experience of students, is a really important way in which you can develop design ideas. The use of statistics, the use of research and the use of student user groups is becoming the way in which the most innovative and progressive developments are being implemented. That user-centric approach is something that we promote at the University of Plymouth on our interior design course, where we run a number of interior design projects with a student accommodation focus to get the very latest thinking coming through as we train up the students of the future. I'd like to thank Dave Clark from I Am The How for invaluable advice and production support in the setting up of this podcast, Kay Hansen for her planning support and co-hosting role for these and our educational podcasts for the University of Plymouth, and Mark Frith for the music. I'd really like to hear your feedback on the podcast. Leave a comment or get in touch via the website or on Instagram. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.
Thank you.